the Lunar Veil. In the farthest reaches of a world where night had long since overtaken day, the sky shimmered with an endless tapestry of stars. Among these stars, there was one moon, veiled from mortal sight, whose existence was whispered in the oldest myths, the Lunar Veil. For centuries, it had remained hidden behind an enchanted shroud, a secret known only to those who dared to seek its truths. The veil was said to guard an ancient power, one capable of either saving or condemning their world. Lira, a young astronomer, had spent her entire life studying the night sky. Night after night, she scoured the heavens, cataloging the stars, watching the constellations shift across the horizon. But on one particular night, something unusual caught her eye. Through her telescope, she observed a faint glimmer on the edge of the sky, something that should not have been there. A second moon. It was dim, barely visible at first, flickering like a distant candle in the wind, but there it was, impossible, yet undeniably real. How? She whispered to herself, adjusting the lens, trying to make sense of the sight before her. Her heart pounded as she reached for her journal, hurriedly noting down every detail. The ancient prophecies, passed down through generations, spoke of a time when the lunar veil would reveal itself, when the hidden moon would reappear as a herald of great change. Some believed it would bring salvation, while others feared it as an omen of doom. Lira had always dismissed those tales as nothing more than stories, but now she wasn't so sure. As she stared into the night sky, a cold chill ran down her spine. Something was happening, and she had the unsettling feeling that this was only the beginning. By dawn, rumors of the second moon had spread like wildfire across the kingdom. Scholars debated its meaning, priests warned of impending disaster, and common folk looked to the sky with a mixture of awe and dread. Lira, however, knew that none of them truly understood what was coming. The appearance of the moon was more than just a celestial event, it was a call to action. It wasn't long before a royal summons arrived at her doorstep. The king himself had commanded the presence of the realm's greatest minds to gather at the palace to discuss the mysterious moon. Lira, though reluctant, packed her charts and maps and set off for the capital. She couldn't shake the feeling that her destiny was intertwined with the moon's return. When she arrived at the grand palace, she was greeted not by a throng of scholars but by the prince himself, Prince Corvin, the kingdom's protector. His tall, imposing figure stood at the entrance, watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Corvin asked, his voice low and serious. Lira nodded. "The second moon, it's real. But I don't understand why it's appearing now." "Neither do I," Corvin replied, his brow furrowing. "But the legends speak of a hidden power tied to the moon, a force that can change the fate of our world. If the veil is lifting, it means that something, or someone, is trying to claim it." Lira's mind raced. She had heard those same legends as a child, tales of ancient gods and celestial warriors who guarded the moon's secrets. But those were just stories, weren't they? Corvin's expression hardened. "I believe we are dealing with something far greater than we can comprehend. I need your help, Lira. You're the only one who might understand what's happening." Before she could respond, a shout echoed through the palace halls. They both turned to see a group of royal guards rushing in, their faces pale with fear. "My lord," one of the guards gasped. "There's been an attack, strange creatures, shadows, they came from the sky." Lira's heart sank. The veil was lifting, and with it, something dark was stirring. That night, under the glow of the twin moons, Lira and Prince Corvin set out on a journey that would take them far beyond the borders of the kingdom. Accompanying them were a handful of elite warriors, each sworn to protect the realm, but even they seemed uneasy as they ventured into the unknown. Their destination, the Silver Peaks, a range of sacred mountains where, according to legend, the Lunar Veil could be parted. As they traveled, the second moon grew brighter, casting an eerie light over the landscape. Shadows danced in the trees, and the air grew colder with each passing mile. Lira couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every gust of wind seemed laden with malice. "We're not alone," Corvin murmured as they rode through a dense forest. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning the darkness. Lira glanced around nervously, clutching the small amulet that hung around her neck, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Her father had always told her it would protect her in times of great danger, but she had never truly believed it until now. Suddenly, a piercing howl echoed through the night. The horses reared, their riders struggling to maintain control as a swarm of dark, shadowy figures emerged from the trees. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their bodies shifting and flickering like smoke. "Hold the line!" Corvin shouted, drawing his sword. The warriors formed a defensive circle around Lira, their blades gleaming in the moonlight as they prepared for battle. The creatures attacked without hesitation, their forms shifting between solid and ethereal as they slashed at the warriors with clawed hands. Lira watched in horror as one of the shadows lunged toward her, its glowing red eyes locked on her amulet. Before it could strike, Corvin stepped in, his sword slicing through the creature with a flash of silver light. The shadow dissipated, but more were coming. "Lira, stay close to me," Corvin commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Lyra's heart raced as she fumbled with her amulet. She didn't know why, but the shadows seemed drawn to it, as if it was the key to something they wanted. As the battle raged on, Lira felt a strange pull from the amulet. It grew warm in her hand, and a soft light began to emanate from it, pushing back the shadows. The creatures hissed and recoiled, their forms flickering as if they were being repelled by the light. What is this?" Lira gasped, staring at the glowing amulet. Corvin glanced at her, his eyes wide with realization. "It's the key," he said breathlessly. "The key to the Lunar Veil." As dawn broke, the group reached the foot of the Silver Peaks, exhausted but alive. The shadowy creatures had retreated, but Lira knew they hadn't been defeated, they were merely waiting. The entrance to the sacred mountains was marked by ancient stone pillars, each inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Beyond the pillars, a narrow path wound its way up the mountain, disappearing into the clouds. "This is it," Corvin said, his voice filled with awe. "The path to the Lunar Veil." Lira took a deep breath, her gaze drifting upward toward the peaks. The amulet in her hand pulsed with energy, as if urging her forward. She knew that once they crossed into the veil, there would be no turning back. As they ascended the mountain, the air grew thin and cold. The wind howled around them, carrying whispers that sent chills down Lyra's spine. She could feel the weight of the amulet growing heavier, its light growing brighter with each step. Finally, they reached the summit. Before them stood the Lunar Veil, a shimmering wall of silver mist that stretched across the sky, obscuring the hidden moon. The sight of it took Lyra's breath away. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a barrier between worlds. Corvin stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. Lira nodded, though her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what awaited them beyond the veil, but she knew they had no choice but to find out. With trembling hands, she raised the amulet toward the mist. The light from the amulet grew brighter, and the veil began to part, revealing a path bathed in pale moonlight. As they stepped through the veil, a surge of energy washed over them. The world beyond was unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering trees made of crystal lined the path, their branches shimmering in the light of the hidden moon. Rivers of liquid silver flowed through the landscape, and the air was thick with magic. At the center of it all stood the Moon Temple, its ancient stone walls carved with symbols that pulsed with power. "We're here," Corvin whispered, his voice filled with reverence. But they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the mist, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The lunar guardians had awoken, and they did not welcome intruders.